Today we have a very special guest and friend of mine, Michael Lutz. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Michael.
Thank you, Paula. Happy to be
So
here.
great. So let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born, where you're currently living, and what are you up to these days?
So I currently live on Miami Beach, Florida, but I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. I was transferred here to Miami in 1995. I've been in the mortgage industry since 92. And in 95, an interesting time for myself and also for my industry and my company. For myself personally, I had just gone through a 7-year ending of a relationship and was willing to look at different things outside of my normal way of thinking. I had never thought of moving to Miami. I just knew I wanted to go somewhere warm, and I was tired of the Chicago winters. At the same time, my company, which at the time was called Sears Mortgage, Sears, the conglomerate, also owned Allstate and Dean Witter. And after Hurricane Andrew in 1992, Allstate Insurance or Sears Financial had to sell off parts of its company. Sears Mortgage was sold, and in that sale, there was an opportunity for me to do what I had done in Chicago, which was open up a branch office from the suburbs into downtown Lincoln Park, Chicago. And that opportunity became available in Miami, Florida. And I had never been here, so it all worked out wonderfully. Life kind of conspired to put it all together. There was no resistance, and that's how I wound up here.
And I'm sure you've got used to the nice weather and changed from the cold. Before we get into your work and into Bitcoin, what did you learn about money growing up, and how has that influenced the way you manage your finances today?
You know, that's an ongoing dialogue for me as I continually redefine my relationship with myself and how I see and who I identify when I say myself, who that self is. Often it's been layered by thoughts and beliefs and conditioned patterns that I either picked up consciously or subconsciously along the way. My family are both of German descent, but both my mom's family and my dad's family. My mom and dad were both born in the United States, and both my grandparents had been born in the United States, but both of their parents were born in Germany and left Germany during all the change in Germany and coming after the recession of the world and depression and things. So the mindset was a lot of scarcity and lack, and growing up with the mindset of what the United States represented to them, which was opportunity for freedom through hard work. So that was kind of the modeling that was presented to me. So it was about what we do in the world will give us X. Do A plus B, you're going to get C, that kind of a pattern. So my father, what I saw my father do, he followed his passion early on. He was a stock car racer and very famous in that circuit because I think when people follow their passion and do what's in them, they're naturally drawn to be successful because they're loving what they do, whatever that doing is. When he married my mother and they had me, he continued racing until they had my younger brother. And that went on for a couple of years. And then my mom had him stop racing because she seen it as dangerous. I saw my dad, go through some horrible accidents, but he was always fine. But, it scared my mom. And so my dad he went to work. And he knew cars. That's all he really knew. He had a high school education, but no more than that. And he did what he could in the auto industry, which he knew how to fix cars, he knew automobiles. So he worked for others for a while, and I knew he wasn't happy in that. And he wound up having an opportunity to be a co-owner in a body shop. And he wound up through the course of my growing up years being a self-employed owner to then owning more than one body shop in Chicago. That's how he wound up making money. And when he retired, a corporation came in and bought his 12 or 11 businesses that he had at that time, and that's how he did. But I saw that as a model that you had to work hard, you had to get up, you had to, because if he didn't go to work, we didn't get fed, type of thing. So yeah, that was the modeling.
So hard work equals financial gain.
That's the conditioning I was brought up under.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, Mike, because one of the things for me why I got into Bitcoin is because I realized that I'm working harder and harder and my money is not going as far, partly due to inflation that we have all faced. Have you noticed in your business and in your life that inflation is affecting you?
Yes, definitely. It's interesting as I go deeper into, again, my relationship to money and how that looks. The word inflation reminds me of inflammation. And inflammation to the body is the same thing as inflation to an economy. It's not healthy and it's not good. And left untreated, it leads to other problems. So I think that right now, the our country, but I think the world in general, has been in an inflated state of growth. And just like any kind of inflammation that goes again unchecked, it then can become other problems. And that's what I think is happening. But ultimately, those other problems, when noticed, when we become aware of them, that's when the choice point kicks in and we get solutions that we can either, like we would in our body, we can either take heed to the symptoms that are coming up and do corrective actions, or not, we ignore and things get worse. And I think that's the direction we're going in as a world economy and also as government economies. We're starting to see. And that's why I think what you're doing and the idea of Bitcoin in and of itself, I see as one of the solutions to what has been happening. And it's very encouraging because I think overall, just like the body has a natural tendency to heal, I think humankind has a ability to always better ourselves. We always adhere to our better angels collectively. It may not look like it, and there's some back and forth as progress goes, but the arc of everything has always been positive expansion and growth. But that sometimes leads to, when we have that, you have to sometimes retract and kind of take a few steps back to then have that expansion and that sustainable growth versus inflated growth.
Well, I love your positive outlook, and that's one reason I wanted to chat with you. Yes, there is a lot of positive things coming ahead, and in the Bitcoin world, we do see that because in the Bitcoin world, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and that means that we don't create more Bitcoin, we don't get to print more Bitcoin. That's all there'll ever be. But for now, a lot of people are living in the real world, the fiat world. And, one thing I've heard that Bitcoiners say is that when banks create loans, they actually create money kind of out of thin air. Can you explain that process, how that works in what you do?
Well, I wish I really was clever enough to be able to explain it, though it's interesting because I'm on a lot of those calls with capital market. And I was explaining to a very good friend of mine who's a primary care physician the other day, because he's in the process of selling one home, trying to buy another, also selling a condo that he has on the market, like moving situations around. And I was telling him about what I had shared with you that happened on Thursday with my company again, laying off some people, which I found a little disconcerting and also surprising given the fact that the popular news medias are interest rates are going to come down and the Fed's going to cut rates. So why would a mortgage company be even laying off more staff right before something like that? Makes no sense. So as we were talking about that, I was telling them how I've been on some of these calls, and I said, when I listen to you talk your medical stuff and I can't understand a word, you're saying because he uses all the medical jargon. I said, that's kind of but I'm also good intuitively to pick up the context of what's been being said versus the form of the words being used. And so my understanding of how the mortgage industry, I'd say the financial industry overall, has been created as a monopoly to move pieces around. The mortgage industry, for one, I can tell you because it was right when I started after the 80s when savings and loan crisis came out, and banks were the only places you could get financing for homes. Well, they came up with mortgage companies like I work for. It's a non-institutional bank. That means there's not really money behind this stuff that we're giving away. We're packaging it and it's getting sold on a secondary market, which is based on bonds, but it was all intermixed with other kind of securities and no one really knew what was in. And that's what led to what happened in like 2007, 2008, et cetera. So it's interesting how, again, we continually kind of reminds me of Wizard of Oz. The closer we get and then open up the curtain and see, oh my God, it's just that little thing behind there running all these mechanisms. That's how I see it.
I love that. That's cool. Let's get into how did you hear about Bitcoin?
Well, how did I first hear it? Again, being in financial services, of course, I've heard about it. We've had conversations about whether or not Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I mean, as an underwriter, I've seen files where people want to use, assets in Bitcoin. Again, I can't use that, but I could use it if it's converted and placed into a bank. That's how we see it right now. So I've been hearing it in the background, like you would be hearing a radio in the background. And it hadn't been until more recently during, again, my own personal evolution about transformation from the identity of myself to my true essence of myself, that Bitcoin starts to come into the background as a song or a melody that's more familiar, and you're picking up, oh, I'm hearing this, and it's more of a catchy tune to me now. And then of course, you shared with me some things, and I shared with you some podcasts I follow of people in the spiritual realm, but they're young and they're into Bitcoin and their take on it. And it's just been more and more resonant to me and my way of thinking. And you've educated me more on it as well, since we've been talking. And it's just, when I say educating me, it's introducing me, because it would be like trying to tell me of a fruit that I've never tasted a bite of, and some exotic flavors and things that I really don't know yet because I haven't bought it. I haven't practiced, don't know that, but it's enough in my consciousness now that it's coming more into the forefront.
So, what do you think is still holding you back from from maybe purchasing your first Bitcoin? I know you said you're still learning about it. I think that's really smart to learn. One thing that I recommend to my friends is read The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth, because that outlines the problem, and it says that the state of the free market is deflationary. So it kind of tells you how the world should be, because of, you know, what you said about the mortgage industry and the financial industry. It's so clouded, we don't know exactly what's going on, and that's one thing I don't like. I want transparency, and Bitcoin represents transparency. The other book is the Bitcoin Standard, and it's not really about Bitcoin. It's about the history of money, and then goes into why Bitcoin. But what's stopping you?
I don't think anything necessarily is stopping me. I just don't think right now that I just, the opportunity hasn't really presented itself 100%. As you know, I've been through furlough for the last year that just recently got lifted. And for me, what that meant was for a year, I worked for a reduced salary. And so just the financial implications of that in and of itself has been really a challenge. And it's actually even delayed my retirement plans because I've had to shuffle things around as well. But nothing is stopping me. And as a matter of fact, I'm getting more and more inspired when, again, in all things in my life, I have never forced something. I've learned. I can't say I've never done that because I've learned the lesson when I force things. And it's like a natural thing. Once it's in the forefront of my mind, like it is, there will be a time that the opportunity will happen and it will be there. So I'm encouraged and I'm looking forward to that because I do see what you were saying about transparency. It's not only in the financial sector that I think all people are looking for transparency now, and they're looking for things that are real and not illusionary anymore or sold to us and packaged in a way. And that's in all institutions. So it's whether it's, you know, financial, medical, religion, education, you know, you name it, all of these institutions are going through this reckoning process of, you know, doing the inner work to really transform things because we're over the illusions, really.
Yes, and like you mentioned, some of the media, we don't always know what's true. Who's telling the truth?
Well,
But
who
one
owns the media, right? The
true,
corporations.
true,
You
true.
know,
Corp,
who holds all those mechanisms behind the
yeah,
layers. Yeah.
they say follow the money to find
Yeah.
out who. I've always believed that when I hear the truth, I know it. I might not always act on it right away, but at least I am aware of it. And I know you have a very strong spiritual practice. How does all of that help you navigate this difficult world sometimes?
It is the way I'd navigate now because I think without something to anchor ourselves more in the depths of truth versus on the surface. The surface gets very choppy, and if we don't have some practice to take us a little bit deeper down into the truths with a capital T, and discernment is in that. And not always listening to others and others' opinion, but actually being able to, because inside we all have a mechanism that can resonate to what is really true to us or what is based on fear and conditioning and programming. And it's only in being able to anchor ourselves into that we can discern that truthfully. Otherwise, we're going to be on that surface, which our thoughts are programmed to be, because that's how we rationalize and fix things out. And it's often based on repetitive patterns, which left unchecked just run the show. And so it's imperative for me to have what you call a spiritual practice or whatever kind of grounding sense to be able to check in with deeper truth for myself.
Yeah, I that's very important for me too. And also, like you mentioned, we are programmed from such a young age. I some of those programs I needed to change, and it's an ongoing thing that anytime I think things that aren't serving me, I need to change it around and say, no, I am financially free. I have what it takes, and whatever is a more positive thought is very important to my life too. Beyond your work and your spiritual practice, what else are you passionate about?
Life as it appears now is what I'm passionate about, and what's been really my encompassing passion the last 3 years is this discovery of no undoing. I'm going to say it's an undoing process because, as you had just mentioned about, I want to look at these patterns. I want to fix these patterns. I've had to, for myself, I had to learn, no, I don't have to do anything. What I have to do is get myself out of the way, because underneath it, in reality, that will come to the surface. I have to just be willing to look at the errors, be willing to look in non-judgment awareness of what has been the incorrect thought systems, and not going into, oh, now I got to fix this. That was my dad's belief, and now I have to like heal that. I don't have to do any of that. I just have to be aware of it, and in that process, I've been able to fully start to embrace and become very passionate about things quickly and just let it come up and then let it come down. And maybe passionate's even the wrong word. It's like a dispassionate involvement with everything, like a curiosity, but not an attachment, and not a like even an aversion to something. It's just being able to do it. Like yesterday, the way the day unfolded for me, and I had no plan to do this, but I wound up at the beach at a certain time of the day. It was beautiful. Like when I just followed the flow and the rhythm, but when I get so caught up in like, oh, this is my hobby, this is what my thing is right now, I kind of block out the spontaneity of being able to let life flow that way. And what I find is I'm so much more alive when I'm doing it that way than trying to follow schedules all day, every day. So, yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to live. And I'm sure that's the same way you'll find Bitcoin. It's just when, like you said, when it's meant to be. And like I said, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because you're such a person who bases his life on honesty and being in the moment and flow. I just know that as you learn more, you'll see more of what I see. And just one more question about Bitcoin. Would you consider an ETF or would you consider self-custody?
Again, now you're talking like my medical friend. I have no idea what the difference are, but I look forward to learning this with you as I go through this process. But that's how far removed I am from it. I don't know what the difference even is.
Good. And that's why I wanted to have you on, because many people are there. And just to give a little brief what the difference is, the ETFs are exchange traded funds that you can buy through Fidelity or Charles Schwab. And it is custodied by those companies. So the Bitcoin is not in your possession, but you get the price appreciation as Bitcoin goes up.
Interesting. Actually, I think I might have that in my 401k portfolio through
Right.
T. Rowe Price. But again, it's nothing that I've done. But now that you mentioned that, I remember that might be in a small percentage of my 401k.
Right. So that's one way to do it. Real hardcore Bitcoiners like to have it in their own self-custody. So you would go on a separate exchange like Coinbase in the USA, which is just the easiest one, maybe not the best, but it's the easiest one. You buy the Bitcoin and then you transfer it to a self wallet, like a little zip drive that is not on the internet, because that you can then take with you anywhere in the world and nobody can take it from you. So that's where Bitcoiners talk about self-sovereignty. Nobody has control of their money. The bank doesn't have control. You have control and you can go anywhere in the world. Being in the USA is not as important to us. Being in Ukraine, that would be important. So that's just the little difference. And just to end with, Mike, what books or practices have inspired you over the years? Or are you reading anything good at the moment that is inspiring you?
Well, as you can see behind me, I have walls of bookcases. I read a lot. What's been most helpful to me lately is non-duality teachings and anything non-duality, because I think part of what you're saying too is we're going into a age of oneness and an awareness of our interconnectedness, and non-duality teachings is breaking the mold of there's a power greater outside of us, there's a power outside of us, there's an evil outside of us. It all lives within us. And so all things that inspire me these days, and my reading passions. I've been a student of A Course in Miracles for the last 3 years, which has been the most transformative of all practices, I think, for me, because it is that undoing of one thought system and helping you see another thought system. And it's a non-dual teaching. And I was just sharing with you before the thing, I'm reading a book right now that's called What Happens When You Let Go, but interesting, it has the word God. It's so like go, like God. And there's so much misconceptions around the word God. So it is really letting go to, and again, on a non-dualistic thing, it's not over to something outside of ourself, but it's to our higher self. And that's important to me.
I love that. We sometimes hear in the Bitcoin world, there is no they, only us. And I love to hear all that, because at the end of the day, yes, we all want to be financially free and we want to be happy, but having that inner connection with whatever is important to you and taking responsibility, not saying it's out there, it's in here. That is a wonderful, wonderful way to end. So thank you for joining me today, Mike. It
Thanks
was
for
great.
having me, Paula, and thanks for educating me on this. I continue to look forward to our dialogues with it and my introduction slowly and surely into Bitcoin.
Well, we all are continuing to learn. So I appreciate everything you said today. Thank you.
Thank you.